Let's look at quantitative and qualitative data, nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio data. What is the difference between quantitative and qualitative data? Quantitative data are countable or measurable. Qualitative data are categorical. That is, they're not countable or measurable. They're attributes or characteristics. You can't do calculations with them. So, given these definitions, classify these data as quantitative or qualitative. Height. Well, height is quantitative because that's something you can measure. Weight? That's also something you can measure, so not surprisingly, that's quantitative. Hair color, yeah, that's more of an attribute or characteristic like blonde or brunette. That's not really something you measure, so that would be qualitative. Age? Age is something we can count, so that is going to be quantitative. Personality? Yeah, again, that's categorical. It's an attribute, a characteristic, so that would be qualitative. Year? Well, years you can count, so that would be quantitative. ID number. This is tricky. You might think, well, that's a number, so it's got to be quantitative. But be careful. That's actually qualitative because you can't do any calculations with it. Instead of an ID number, you could just as easily have an ID name like Smurf or Joker or whatever. So actually, ID numbers are qualitative, even though, frankly, they are numbers. We can also classify data in this way: nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. Nominal data, those are categories with no order, so you can't say one category is better or worse than another. Ordinal, these are ordered categories like rankings or ratings on a scale. The differences are not measurable. So what's the difference between fourth and fifth? We don't know whether it's a big difference or a little difference. So for example, if you finish fourth in the Olympics and somebody finishes fifth, we have no idea what the difference in the times are or what the difference in the scores are. Interval, that means measurements can be compared using less than, greater than, or equals. It also has no true zero, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Ratio, these are measurements, in other words, feet or pounds with a true zero. That is a natural zero or an inherent zero. That's a zero where zero means nothing. Classify these data as nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. Height. Height is going to be a ratio because they're measurements and they have a true zero. Height has a true zero. 0 inches means no height at all. How about temperature in degrees Fahrenheit? That would be an interval. Let's look back at the definition of interval. So interval data, measurements can be compared using less than, greater than, or equals. You can say one temperature is greater than another, but it has no true zero. That is, 0 does not mean nothing. 0 does not mean none of the quantity is present. Degrees Fahrenheit does not have a true zero. 0 degrees does not mean no temperature at all. So that would be an example of interval data. How about weight? Weight would be a ratio because if someone weighs 100 and another person weighs 50, notice a person who weighs 100 is twice the weight of the person who weighs 50. We can't do the same thing with temperature. You can't say, oh, because it's 64 degrees outside, it's twice as warm as it was yesterday when it was 32. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. How about hair color? Nominal. So it's just a category. You can't say one hair color is greater than another. How about age? Age would be ratio. Someone who's 12 years old is greater than somebody who's 6 years old, certainly. In fact, that person is twice as old. Notice there's a ratio there. You can be twice as old as somebody. Personality, again, that's nominal. How about year? That would be interval because there is no year 0. So you can't say that the year 1000 is twice. The year is twice as big as the year 500. That makes no sense. Class rank. Okay, this would be an example of something that's ordinal. So if your rank in your high school graduating class was 9th, then of course you're higher than someone whose class rank was, let's say, 12th or 15th. Social Security number. This is a number, but it's nominal because you can't do calculations with it. It's not like you can subtract Social Security numbers or multiply them by 2 or whatever and come up with something meaningful. How about a survey with these responses? Strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree. That would be ordinal, because basically we're saying top, next tier down, next tier down, next tier down, next tier down. So it's a little like first, second, third, fourth, and fifth place. That scale is actually called the Likert scale. Most people call it Likert, but it's really pronounced Likert, named after Rensis Likert from 1903 to 1981. How about the rating of the service at a restaurant? Poor, fair, good, excellent? That would also be ordinal. So again, it's like categories, top, second tier down, next tier down. IQ score? That would be interval. You don't have a 0. If your IQ is 0, that doesn't mean that there's no intelligence present, although you'd really have to be pretty bad to have an IQ of 0. Amazon rating between 1 star and 5 stars? That's actually going to be ordinal as well. Let's classify nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio data as quantitative or qualitative. Qualitative data are categorical. They're not countable or measurable. They're attributes or characteristics. You can't do calculations with them. So we saw earlier hair color, personality, even ID number. So examples of qualitative data would be nominal data. These are categories with no order. It's not like red is greater than brown is greater than, blonde. That's not going to work. Quantitative data are countable or measurable. This gets tricky, okay? So we saw a moment ago that nominal data are qualitative. Ordinal data are both qualitative and quantitative. So they're quantitative in the sense that you have ordered rankings. I'd rather go to a restaurant that gets 5 stars than a restaurant that gets 4 stars. So it's like rankings, ratings on a scale. And yet, the differences are not measurable. What's the difference between 4th and 5th? So because you can't really do calculations with these, they're kind of qualitative as well. So ordinal data are both qualitative and quantitative, whereas interval data and ratio data, those are quantitative. Speaking of rankings, one of the worst films ever is Ballistic, X versus Sever. On Rotten Tomatoes, of 119 film critics, 0% liked the film. One film critic said that if the film were run backwards, including the dialogue, it would not make any less sense.